This is the PocketBook InkPad Color 3, and it was definitely one of the most surprising product launches in the e-reading space in late 2023. Why, you ask? Well, because PocketBook launched the InkPad Color 2, this one, not too long before this one. And I actually haven't even published my review of the InkPad Color 2 at this point because I wasn't able to finish it in time before they launched the InkPad Color 3. The reason for it being released so soon after the InkPad Color 2 was the high demand. E-Ink wasn't able to deliver the older Kaleido Plus displays in higher numbers, so PocketBook made the switch to Kaleido 3. So that's how the InkPad Color 3 came to be so quickly. So this is a color ink e-reader with Kaleido 3 display technology, which is the same tech we've seen in a couple of e-ink tablets from Boox and Bigme before. But there's a big difference. This isn't a tablet, it's an e-reader. It's laser focused on reading, still offers a couple of useful extras, but doesn't run Android and therefore can't be expanded with apps. So let's check it out and see if it's worth considering as your next e-reader. If you've seen other PocketBook e-readers, the InkPad Color 3 looks familiar immediately. It uses the same design language as the previous models and basically looks like the InkPad Color 2. It also looks very much like the InkPad 4, which is the black and white version. The main difference in terms of the design is its display front. The InkPad Color 3's display is not flush with the bezel. Instead, the screen is recessed into the frame just a bit. Not having an additional layer of glass on top of the e-ink screen is a small advantage for better readability and also reduces the overall weight of the device. It doesn't look as modern though and isn't as scratch resistant. But since e-ink Kaleido displays are pretty dark in general, every bit of background brightness you can get is a big win. Same as most other PocketBook models, the InkPad Color 3 comes with 4 physical buttons below the screen. That area is also a bit wider for providing a secure grip. The button design is actually quite ingenious. The 2 page turn buttons in the middle have this 3-dimensional shape, which makes it really easy to find them with your fingers without looking. One other great improvement over the older models is the faster quad-core CPU with 1 GB of RAM. PocketBook e-readers aren't generally known for being super responsive. They aren't bad, but definitely not the fastest of the bunch. With the new CPU, it's now so much better, especially compared to the InkPad Color 1, which had a dual-core CPU and at times had a pretty sluggish user experience. That's all in the past now with the InkPad Color 3. It's so much more responsive and feels almost snappy at times. The reason why the CPU upgrade was even necessary most likely has something to do with the Kaleido screen technology, which seems to be more CPU intensive as black and white displays. Same as the previous InkPad Color models, there's also a 2900 mAh battery, which is pretty large for an e-reader and results in pretty decent runtimes. I'll come back to that a bit later in the video. There's also a built-in speaker for listening to audiobooks, music, and the text-to-speech function, which I'll demo later on. One thing PocketBook didn't improve upon is the size of the internal storage. With 32 gigs, it's not especially small, but for an audio-capable e-reader that is also most likely being used with larger files in general, because of its color display, they should have upgraded that as well in my opinion. But to be fair, 32 gigs of which around 28 gigs are available to use are more than enough for most users. So it might be a bit nitpicky to even mention it. But still, it's a potential limitation that could have been avoided. The reason why the internal storage isn't expandable though is the built-in IPX8 water protection, which is definitely cool to have because it gives a bit of peace of mind when using the e-reader in the tub or outdoors when it starts raining or something like that. That's actually also a unique selling point for a Kaleido 3 device, because there's no other with water protection. build quality of the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 is pretty nice, with only the back cover feeling a bit cheaper than I would have preferred. But it's not too bad, and the red plastic design helps in securing a good grip. But it's still a bit annoying that the back cover is also incredibly prone to showing smudges and is also somewhat easy to scratch. And there's also this cool way of attaching this optionally available front cover directly to the back of the device by pulling this part right here off, which reminds me a lot of older Sony e-readers. I loved it on them in the past, and I do love the revival here because it offers protection for the display without adding much bulk. And it's actually even better than the old Sony e-readers because this one is held opened and closed magnetically. What's also nice is that the e-reader doesn't creak or crack when applying a little force, which was a small issue with the InkPad 4. So that's not a problem on this one. With a weight of 270 grams, it's not especially lightweight, but still the lightest of the Kaleido 3 bunch. And that also underlines the e-reading focus because holding the InkPad Color 3 in one hand for longer periods of time is definitely easier than with the somewhat heavy Bookstep Mini Z. Okay, let's talk about the display. As I mentioned, the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 uses Eink Kaleido 3 display technology. At this point, it's the best color ink tech there is. The 7.8-inch screen has a resolution of 300 ppi for the black and white ink screen and 150 ppi for the color filter. Two resolutions? Well, it works the same as other Kaleido displays. There's a typical ink screen in here, which looks and works the same as in a regular black and white e-reader like the InkPad 4. The difference with Kaleido technology is the mentioned color filter that sits right on top of the ink screen. It's passive, always visible, and doesn't draw any power. The colors are rendered by strategically darkening the ink screen's pixels underneath the RGB subpixels of the color filter. By doing so, only the remaining non-darkened color reflects most of the incoming light and is visible to the naked eye. So for example, to generate the color blue, the green and red subpixels are darkened. It's a pretty clever solution to implement colors on an ink screen actually, but it has one downside. The screen looks noticeably darker as a result, because that RGB color filter is always visible darkening the display. It's so dark, in fact, that it's not very comfortable to use without enabling the built-in front light. But that's not exclusive to the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 and true for all Kaleido Color e-ink devices. At least the InkPad Color 3 is a tiny bit better thanks to the missing flush front glass. But still, in day-to-day use, I suspect 99% of people will most likely use this with the front light turned on, so I'll be showing the e-reader for the rest of the review that way. Having said that, the 150 ppi resolution of the color layer is actually a big improvement over the previous generation. Thanks to that, the display lost a lot of its, I can only describe it as shimmering graininess, because with the older Kaleido Plus generation, you could see the RGB subpixels as tiny little dots on the screen. Not anymore. The new Kaleido 3 technology used in the InkPad Color 3 restores the paper-like feeling of e-ink. There's still a slight grain to the screen, but it's so much subtler and doesn't really impair readability. So they actually fixed my biggest complaint about the InkPad Color 2 with the new screen tag, making the e-reader also a good choice for reading regular black and white text. The high resolution, unsurprisingly, also helps in improving crispness of the screen overall. Color saturation didn't really change though, so don't expect colors to look as vivid as on a tablet. They are a bit muted, same as we've seen with other Kaleido 3 screens in the past. And it still can generate 4096 colors. But that 7.8-inch display still looks pretty great if you ask me. And comparing it with my go-to comic for these reviews, it doesn't really look bad at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. I love having colors on an e-reader. In my opinion, it enhances the user experience a lot, even for something simple as browsing the library. But obviously, it's even better for comics, colored mangas, and magazines. Just one thing to mention, the default settings for color edition are a bit off, if you ask me. PocketBook allows a couple of adjustments which help a lot. So if you get this e-reader, I definitely recommend jumping right into those settings and doing some adjustments as well. These are the settings that work best for me. The Frontlight quality of the InkPad Color 3 is pretty good, and there's really nothing to complain about. If I want to be nitpicky, I can see a very faint brightness gradient, but I doubt it will be an issue for most people. And contrast levels are also good with the Frontlight. You can also adjust the color temperature from cold white to warm orange and anything in between. And ghosting isn't an issue when just showing text. But it can be a bit more obvious for image-rich content. Which brings me to the dark mode, which the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 also has. Naturally, ghosting is a bit more pronounced with that one, but remains within reasonable bounds. Personally, I'm not really using dark modes on e-readers simply because I think the default setup offers a good compromise between readability and eye-friendliness already. But with the dark mode, you can even cut down on light exposure even more if you want to. And as always, even if you don't need it regularly, it's good to have the option. At the moment, however, there's still an issue with comics and mangas in CBR or CBZ format though. Although there's a setting to exclude illustrations from being inverted, that doesn't really work on those files, which makes using a dark mode pointless for comics. I hope PocketBook will fix that issue with future software updates, but I'd recommend not buying it on hopes and promises, but what it can actually deliver right now. So if that's something you rely on, wait and check the changelog for the InkPad Color 3 software regularly. Another cool feature is the automatic front light adjustment. It's not done via sensors, like on the Kindle Oasis, for example, but with a customizable timetable. So you can adjust the brightness and color tone according to your needs on an hourly basis. This has the advantage of being completely independent of outside light sources, so no sudden changes if the lighting conditions in the room change. But obviously, there's also its disadvantage, so no automatic adaptations based on your surroundings. But then again, you can also manually adapt the settings. As I mentioned in the beginning, the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 is a dedicated e-reader. So same as with Kindle or Kobo devices, it runs its own operating system and UI, not Android. For the longest time, PocketBook was something of a niche choice. They always had a great feature set, but user-friendliness wasn't really great. But that changed in the last couple of years. They put in a lot of work to refine the user interface and tackled almost all of the issues I had with the e-readers. They are now much more balanced in merging ease of use with functionality. And the UI feels organic and is easy to use as a result. But you already knew that if you've seen my other PocketBook reviews. Since I'm always criticizing companies for their data privacy and login practices, I also want to offer praise where it's due. PocketBook is creating some of the most open e-readers software-wise, meaning you don't need to log in or sign up to any services and can still use all features of the e-reader, apart from buying eBooks and audiobooks from the store, of course. And I also got confirmation that PocketBook stopped gathering anonymous usage data with the latest firmware 6.8. You were able to disable that in the past in the settings, but now it's completely gone. And they also didn't just take their word for it, but they checked the connections with Wireshark. And lo and behold, it just seems to sync some shop-related data from Hetzner servers from time to time. But other than that, when not downloading anything and not using the browser, Wireshark didn't capture anything. It sounds like a little thing, but it's so refreshing because that's usually not how things work in the e-ink space anymore, unfortunately. So the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 is a good choice for privacy-conscious users who don't want to be locked into an ecosystem. But those who want to have the comfort of an inbuilt store can still have that as well. Okay, so let's talk about usability and features. As always, the PocketBook UI offers great flexibility thanks to decent personalization options, from mild home screen adjustments to tweaking the quick links in the notification, adapting the touch zone actions, and remapping the hardware buttons. The built-in library is also following that same trend. It's the best you can get in the e-reading space thanks to the ample filtering and sorting options. Whether you rely on Calibra tags or a folder structure to organize your books, both options are supported. Navigating the continuously scrollable library feels a bit unconventional at first, but actually works great after a short adjustment period. But if you still prefer to do page-by-page flips, you can do so with the physical or virtual buttons as well. Inside the book, you have the usual text styling options to adjust the layout to your needs. You can also install your own fonts. The dictionary feature offers a vast selection of dictionaries that you can install for free with just a few clicks from within the user interface. The dictionary function works well in general, but mainly tends to identify words in their infinitive form only. So depending on the source language, you might need to adapt the looked up word manually from time to time. But PocketBook is working on that exact issue and has implemented something called morphological dictionaries. Those aim to improve the accuracy, which works in some instances, but not all, at least not yet. So there's still room for improvement, at least in German. The note-taking capabilities of the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 are also pretty nice. You can make annotations with the virtual QWERTY keyboard and also directly on the page with your fingers. Just be aware that the handwriting feature isn't the same natural writing experience you'd find in a dedicated note-taking tablet with a Wacom touchscreen. It's more like a well-functioning bonus feature. There's also a nice text-to-speech function available that can be useful as an aid for people with a visual impairment, those who are learning how to read, or simply if you want to continue in a book but can't look at the screen. As it reads, it highlights the current position by underlining it. The voice generation is obviously not as great as a professionally recorded audiobook, and also just a bit behind what others are offering with Android, but still pretty decent nonetheless. And for a couple of languages, you also have different speakers available. So let's listen to how it sounds.
Mr. Bennett's property consisted almost entirely in an estate of 2,000 a year, which, unfortunately for his daughters, was entailed in default of heirs male on a distant relation, and their mother's fortune, though ample for her situation in life, could but ill supply the deficiency of his. Her father had been an attorney in Meryton, and had left her £4,000. She had a sister married to a Mr. Phillips, who had been a clerk to their father and succeeded him in the business, and a brother settled in London in a respectable line of trade.
Besides the TTS function, there's also support for audiobooks and music through dedicated apps. The system can handle MP3 files, which gives you a lot of freedom when getting your audiobooks. But it also means you can't use Audible since that is a proprietary service. But that's a small price to pay for more independence, if you ask me. Besides having the best library in the e-reading space, PocketBook also offers the best PDF functionality. The 300 ppi resolution helps in getting a quick overview of the page, and you can also crop the page margins and zoom in to enhance readability. Same as on Onyx Books devices, the columns mode is my personal favorite, which allows you to automatically zoom in on portions of the page and switching from segment to segment. Just be aware that it's still an e-reader first, and despite it offering more than others in that space, it's not as comprehensive as the PDF functionality of Onyx Books tablets. And even though the 7.8-inch screen seems a bit small for reading comics and mangas, it's actually working pretty well overall. And you can also switch to landscape to enhance readability further if needed. The eBook Store also significantly improved over the last couple of years. This device isn't connected to a specific retailer, but directly to PocketBook. So just be aware that the experience might differ a bit depending on where you buy it. But in general, the shop is integrated very well into the rest of the system. And since my last review, they actually also improved the search function, so I was no longer scrolling through endless lists to find what I was looking for. And if you don't want to use the built-in store, you can actually also use the browser to just open another one and get your ebooks directly from there. Just not from Amazon, because they are using their own file format. And last but not least, a quick note about battery life. With a page turn interval of 15 seconds and the Frontlight at 100%, the battery drains at around 6% per hour. So that's around 16 to 17 hours of battery life in that test, which is not record-breaking, but still decent. Which brings us to the conclusion of this review. And I have to say that the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 wasn't just a surprise, but a pleasant one. With the new Kaleido 3 technology, PocketBook has addressed my main criticism of the previous model. At first glance, the slightly higher resolution of 150 ppi for the color filter might not seem like much, but as I mentioned in the past, it dramatically enhances the quality of the display. The biggest advantage of this improvement is the display's more paper-like appearance. Something e-ink usually excels at was somewhat compromised with the previous Kaleido Plus technology. With Kaleido 3, the screen now simply looks better because the RGB subpixels aren't as noticeable, resulting in a much more enjoyable reading experience. The remaining two drawbacks of the Kaleido technology seem less significant at this point. The generally darker display is easily brightened with the built-in front light, and one quickly gets used to the muted color saturation, which makes the color display a real benefit overall. Even the home screen with colored ebook covers looks more appealing, but it's obviously even better with colored comics, mangas, or magazines, where the color screen significantly enhances the user experience. From my perspective, the biggest downside of the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 is its price of around 320 euros. But even with that price point, the InkPad Color 3 is the most affordable e-ink Kaleido 3 device on the market at this point. The InkPad Color 2 was already a good device, which I might still post my review for, by the way, but I could only recommend it to a smaller audience due to the lower color resolution. With the InkPad Color 3, I'm now comfortable in recommending the device to a much broader audience. If you're aware of the remaining mentioned drawbacks, there's hardly anything to complain about the PocketBook InkPad Color 3. Not only is viewing color content great, but reading regular ebooks is also much better thanks to Kaleido 3. Together with the fast CPU, good haptics, and the huge feature set, the PocketBook InkPad Color 3 is really a joy to use. Like and subscribe if you found this review helpful. Thanks for your time watching, and see you in the next one.